Welcome to the Gateless Podcast. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm your host, Kara Carews. This is where you'll find conversations with self-made women who share their playbooks, their tips, their actual experiences on the journey to success. I also chat with experts and practitioners of mindset, stress, productivity, emotional, and mental health, because if you're listening to this, you're somebody that bets boldly on yourself and you care about optimizing how you feel, perform, give back, love, and just move through the world. This podcast is here to help you become the absolute most incredible version of yourself in life and in business. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your feedback and reviews. The only way that we grow right now is from you sharing your favorite episodes with your family and friends on social media. So thank you for doing that. Go do that big, cool thing that you've been dreaming about today. This episode is part 1 of 2 with Dr. Jennifer Blossom. Jen is the founder of Blossom Leadership, and in this episode, we are talking about unmasked leadership and what it means to be an unmasked leader. We talk about the types of ways that people, especially women, mask themselves in leadership roles, such as perfectionism or imposter syndrome, and how that comes out in how effective you are as a leader or how ineffective you are as a leader. We talk about ways to incorporate authenticity and vulnerability into your leadership style while still being results driven. You will hear Jen cover tactical ways to implement these strategies into your work and ways to hold yourself accountable to staying consistent in these unmasked leadership practices. Listen to this episode if you are a people leader or you want to be a people leader and you want to take your impact really to the next level in a way that feels like you're being true to yourself and being extremely effective and results driven in your style. This is also an episode to listen to if you want to curate really authentic and trusting relationships with your team that you lead and leverage that as a superpower to being very high performing as a team and as an individual. So with that, welcome, Dr. Jen. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you, Jen. This topic is very important, so meaty. There's no way we're going to cover everything in one discussion, but thank you so much for your time and for being here. I really appreciate it.
Girl, thank you.
Could you kick us off with just giving us a little bit of background on what you're doing now and how you got started in this field in general?
Yeah, I'm just so pumped to be here. I know, Kara, we had met earlier and we're talking about this topic and how needed it is. So a Cliff Note version, I was born and raised in Alaska and did the whole typical grow up, go to college, go to grad school, blah, 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 all of that. And in that, really found myself caught in this season of perfectionism and people pleasing and trying to earn my worth and earn my value, which I had learned now as an adult, those coping strategies as a child, but like we all learn stuff as kids and don't realize it. And anyways, those haven't served me great until they didn't. And so it kind of bit me in the butt when I was in my latter years of college and grad school, where I started to really dive in and experience anxiety disorders and panic disorders and just shoved them, didn't pay attention to them because I was in this season of trying to get through, trying to hammer out, trying to be this high achiever, and then got into the healthcare where then I was seen as this individual who was the helper, who was the healer, who was the medical professional, medical expert. How can I have all of these struggles internally when I'm supposed to be the one who has it all together? So then it started this ripple effect of never addressing the root and just shoving and shoving and shoving, and later learning that I was masking and masking and masking. Long story short, ended up having a pretty significant breakdown when we had moved to Washington State. We have been here for, going on three and a half years. And when we moved, we intentionally moved to seek out growth and community, all of the things that, it's a very, very intentional move. But in that, we had lost everything we knew, our jobs, our family and support system. We knew nobody when we moved out here, which was intentional that way. However, it felt like we were building on just rocky soil, quicksand, trying to figure things out, and had all these changes in life as well happening. In that time, I had built an online company built on motherhood and totally rolled the wave of courses and evergreen funnels and the whole thing, and decided when I moved to Washington, I wasn't feeling that anymore. It wasn't aligned and wanted to move more towards in-person events. So we had all these, changes, shutting that down and all the things. Anyways, moving here, had this really intense panic attack that broke me down to my core. I was on a run. It was like 6:28 to be exact in the morning. And I heard all of these really loud noises like boom, 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 boom. And I couldn't tell if they were gunshots, if they were like metal sheets clanging together. I didn't know what it was, but there was nothing around me. And in that moment, I had all this pain in my heart and I saw this like vision of not being able to reach my sons and my husband. And it was literally all of those things within 2 seconds. And I was in our neighborhood and I couldn't figure out how to get back home. So it was just like such this out of body dissociation experience of my brain literally being like, "Hey, red flags everywhere. What's happening is not working." And
Whoa.
so in that, I didn't tell anybody. I suffered for 2 years with that silently, didn't tell a single soul because I was so scared of it. B, I was so embarrassed and ashamed by it. And C, I was like, "What the freak is this? I don't know what to do with that experience." And so in that, found myself stuffing and masking even more until I was like, I can't do this anymore, and had to seek out help for it and realize that, oh my gosh, for 10, 15 years, all I've been doing is masking. I've been running from myself. I've been running from my feelings, been running from all of these things on the inside, but on the outside, we've never been more successful on paper. I mean, building multiple six-figure businesses. And you would look at all the things that we had externally, and it's like, this is the all American family. And it
Mhm.
was a lie. And so that's what started my passion for creating this new company, Blossom Leadership. We are all about mental and emotional well being for high achievers, for high performers, specifically in that unmasking era where we can sit down and have the real conversations and have the raw trainings and have the tools to help high achievers realize, hey, this is how we're masking as high achievers. We've never been taught this. Here's how you pull back those layers, connect with who you truly are, and begin to let go of all that other crap that's not serving you and really step into your power, your alignment, your freedom. It's true inner freedom. And in that has just been absolutely life changing. And I think it's funny how we experience, not funny, but it's incredible how we experience these moments in life of our true breakdowns that can be a catalyst for a true revolution and true change in others.
Before I'm so excited to talk more about unmasked leadership and what that means and how it happens in probably most of our lives today. But before we dig into it, what you were just describing was like a moment of overwhelm, total
Mhm.
disorientation, like panic attack, all of these being at the peak of success on paper, but feeling so dissociated with
Yeah.
that and not your inner happiness not feeling aligned with the success that you were having. But you mentioned that you were feeling you didn't tell anybody about that moment for a while and you felt embarrassed by it and you basically ran from it. Do you have words for what exactly you felt embarrassed by? Like in hindsight, thinking about
Mhm.
it? Was it like, oh, I should be grateful, but I'm not, and I'm really unhappy? Or like, what exactly was it that you felt as though you couldn't be honest about?
I was so embarrassed of the emotional out of controlness that happened.
Mm,
The out of control in that split second that my mind felt, and then I felt like I had 0 control of that moment. 0 control of these loud noises that I heard, 0 control of not being able to reach this vision of I mean, my 2 sons and my husband were behind this plexiglass, and I couldn't get to them, and I was so embarrassed by what felt like I mean, it wasn't a psychotic breakdown, but it felt like it, and was it 2 seconds? It was literally maybe 2 seconds. So I was embarrassed of the event that happened, and I didn't know how to tell people about it, and so I kept it all inside.
It's so interesting. I mean, like, perspective is everything, and, like, where you are in your life when things like this happen to you is also everything. As you're describing that, like, I've definitely had a
Mhm.
similar moment, which led to me making a pretty big change in my life as well. But I think on the other side of a lot of work, maybe if something like that happened to me now, I would be like, "Oh, is this, like, a spiritual awakening? Is this" like, I feel like you mentioned the word I was embarrassed by how out of control I felt, and I could so relate to
Mhm.
being embarrassed in moments of feeling out of control, but I think that's only because in that wherever my headspace was in that moment was because all of my self-worth was wrapped up in the fact that I had my shit
Mhm.
together and I was in control and all this stuff, And if you could get
Exactly.
on the other side of that, sometimes these experiences that are supposed to be meaningful and are supposed to wake you up in some way. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is it was probably embarrassing to you because you put a lot of self-worth in
Totally.
feeling in control and all of those things. And as
Totally.
soon as we let go of that and we can be authentic and vulnerable about we're never in control,
You're never in control. Yeah.
it
No,
feels different, right?
totally. You are so spot on with that. It is. It was like this wrestle with pride
Hmm.
of, yeah, this self-worth that was the image of the Jenny that was perfect, which is such a fake lie
Yeah.
that is supposed to have it all together, that is supposed to be this leading light force. And how dare I have a 2 seconds where I couldn't live up to my own
Hmm.
prison of that image, and that's what it was.
And this like digging into that experience for you, I feel like it's such a good segue to talking about what unmasked leadership even
Yeah.
is. Because if we're in positions in our life of leading people, and I don't care if that's like in a traditional sense of you are in a leadership role at a company, or you're an entrepreneur and you have a team under you, or you're just a person in life that is an example for anyone
Yeah.
around you. I feel like to be self aware enough to lead with vulnerability, authenticity, and truly understand to the core that nobody's actually in control. And there's zero value
Yeah.
in putting on a facade of perfection or of this idealistic version of oneself. And that's not an effective way to lead. The better leader you become as soon as you realize those
Exactly.
things. So I would love to hear a little bit more from you on like truly what unmasked leadership is and when you became interested
Yeah.
in that topic and how you started studying it and understanding it and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good question. It's honestly from that I would call, like you said, that spiritual awakening. And it didn't happen overnight. It was this realization of, who am I? And I put on all of these masks to try to prove to the world that I was somebody else, but I wasn't being truthful to myself. And the sad part is I didn't even realize that. I didn't realize that had this huge lie to myself of who I was. And so that's what really led me to this unmasking research and figuring out what happens for us, especially who are in these roles where we're leading others. And like you said, this can be in corporate, this can be in entrepreneurship, this can be at home. Like we all have leadership positions
Mhm.
in our lives. And if we're not connected to who we are at our root, we're not living in alignment and to our fullest potential. And I think that sounds very fluffy. I think that can sound very like affirmation-y, but when we really pull back those layers, it's true emotional freedom. And when
Mhm.
we are walking in freedom and light every single day and truly overflowing in that, and that's not a prescription that we're never going to have problems or we're never going to have issues in life. It is not like an escape card for hard trials, but it's the empowerment of knowing how to walk through those trials with the tools. So if something like this ever happens again, which God willing, we have the awareness now to have the proactive strategies in place where we can be centered and grounded, not in control, let that control go, but have the discipline in place. We know how to walk through it. We know how to come back to the present. And so truly being unmasked is taking off all the layers that are no longer serving you, that are holding you back, that are causing you pain, that are causing you to run from yourself, that are causing you blocks from stepping into that next version, that next level. And it's experiencing and creating the inner freedom and the inner peace that we are all longing for. And that connection, when we can find that, it changes your world. And then from there, changes the world around you at home, in your workplace and the community, and it's this true ripple effect.
That makes sense to me. What are ways that people do mask themselves in a
Mhm.
traditional or non-traditional leadership role? Maybe let's just talk about traditional. Like, what are some examples or ways that a leader might mask themselves out of fear
Yeah.
or insecurity or whatever it is?
Yeah. No, this is so good. This is actually one of the routes I shared in the keynote last month. Actually, I had shared my own mask. So the first is the perfectionist mask. So we put on this perfectionist mask that everything's perfect, we're all good. It's this really hard, almost like this plastic front. You can think of it as layers of like plastic layers of I'm this rock and everything is good. So it's the social media, right? That looks perfect on the outside, curated photos, all the things. But in reality, you're like, I know what's really going on there. And so whether it's that look on social or it's the interaction in the boardroom or wherever, it's like everything's perfect and we're all good. That's a huge mass perfectionism. Another one could be imposter syndrome, thinking that we're not good enough, thinking that we're not worthy enough, thinking that we don't deserve this. And it could be a promotion, it could be a different career, it could be true like goodness and freedom. And we develop those self sabotaging bad habits. So imposter syndrome is huge. It could be like the happiness mask of like, I'm always happy and I never feel anything sad. I never feel any shame. I never feel any guilt. I never feel any pain. Like, I'm happy. We're all good. And those three were like huge for me. So those, I mean, we could go on and on and on for different masks and different ideas, but those are the three that I see a lot of women struggle with over and over and over again in multiple fields and multiple stages in life.
And why are we doing this?
Protection. We're doing it to protect ourselves. And it's like, it's cool because it's like our brain's natural way to put this layer up and this buffer to make sure we're safe on the inside. But in reality, we're not facing our true self. And there's pain underneath that mask. And so if we can figure out why we're masking and what's at the root of it, we're going to unlock that freedom. But we're trying to block ourselves from some kind of pain or
Mhm.
insecurity or experience or these false lies or false narratives or false beliefs that we have developed that we've caught from culture that have been passed down from generations or family or people who have spoken over it and we've never dealt with them. So they've just manifested and snowballed in different ways. And now it's this big hard mask that 9 times out of the 10, those people don't even know that they're wearing because we've developed this coping strategy around it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, I've done this so many times myself, and I've witnessed other people doing this so
Yes.
many times. Why is masking the reality of who you are or masking vulnerability and authenticity when in a position of leadership ineffective?
Because you're not true. And I think you're not true to yourself. I mean, you can get by with it. Like it's very functional. It's very functional. You can get by with it, but it's not effective because you're not being true to you. So then it affects your trust and it with yourself, other people. It affects your connection. It affects communication. It affects so many things that if you're able to unlock it, you can go so much deeper and higher. And I always preface that like one of my goals for this year has been to go deeper and not necessarily higher. And typically what I have found that when you're able to go deeper, you go higher as well. And so when we are masking, we are not connecting to who our truth is. And in that moment, it just blocks what we can do, what we can create, how we can expand. It's very much this constrictive element. And I think that that is where so many of us get caught in this trap is like, well, I'm still doing good and we can perform, like air
Yep.
quotes here, really well when we mask, but we're also in this constrictive environment and we're not tapping into our fullest potential, both externally and internally. That's this internal struggle is like you can do all the things great and well on paper, but until you learn how to unmask, there's going to be this disconnect and nobody may even know. Like you're very functional, but there's true freedom and expansion when you can connect the two, and that's where we need to have these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about the times that I've done this in my career, it's because I didn't have the confidence that if
Yeah.
I led in an unmasked way, I would also still be able to execute as a results driven leader. It
Yes.
felt like, okay, I have to be one certain way to drive the productivity, results,
Right.
outcomes as like a shareholder of a business that I'm leading or running.
Right.
And there's not much room to also be vulnerable or super open or let people see authentically me
Mm.
during those scenarios. And I could absolutely in hindsight say that was because of, I didn't have the confidence maybe that I have now, or I didn't realize that people aren't just looking to be
Yeah.
led by somebody that is surface level that they can't truly relate to. And in fact, you work harder, you stay longer at a job, you are a lot more comprehensively invested when you feel like you do know your leader and you feel like your leader sees you as a whole person and you feel
Yeah.
like your leader is a whole person too. So I could totally, in hindsight, understand why I've not done it well in the past. But for somebody that's thinking about, okay, I am in a role of leadership or just a role model to people in my life,
Yeah.
how can they tactically start trying to implement this unmasked leadership style in
Yeah.
what they're doing. And maybe
Yeah.
it's like step by step, or maybe it's like a slow process, or I don't know. I'm very curious to
Yeah.
what's the playbook?
It's so easy for us to ask, okay, how do we do this? But the reality is it's not just from a podcast, right? It's being able to hear these seeds and let them sink into your soul and then showing up and doing the work every single day. So I think a really good place to start for this for us is to understand that we mask because we're afraid to be vulnerable. We're
Mm,
afraid to be perceived as weak, as someone who doesn't have like your credibility. We don't want to have this pressure to be ourselves because we have this pressure to conform to the norms or stereotypes of what a leader should be, or we have this true desire to control outcomes, to control our teams, to control all of these things in the workplace or home or wherever you have your leadership role. And the reality is that when we are able to embrace authenticity while remaining results driven, that is where the magic happens. So when I was thinking about this, like, okay, where have I been able to implement this? And I came up with three really rock solid ways that I've been able to implement authenticity and unmasking while remaining results driven, because that's key, right? For us, because we want to see our, our results. So the first is we got to lead by example. So we can demonstrate as leaders true authenticity when we are true to our values, when we're true to our principles, when we're true to our vision, wow, we still set high standards and expectations for performance, for results. And oftentimes we can lead to too much of the focus on performance and results. And in that we veer away from our values, our principles, our true north. And that's what happened to me. It was just these little micro decisions every single day that slowly led me away from who I was at my core until I woke up and realized, who am I and what decisions am I making? Like, these are not in alignment with me. And then I was like, how did I get here? And so it's just it's this subtle, sneaky shift that will take you off of your course. And that's why it's so important every single day that we renew and we refocus and we recenter every single day on our values, principles, beliefs, and vision. And we know that so we can lead by example and be anchored in that true confidence. The second is when we focus on transparency. So this is huge for being able to communicate openly with team members, whether your team's at home or whether your team's at work or your team's in your business or wherever you see that team, about challenges, about progress, about the goals. And in that is able to foster trust, it's able to foster accountability, it's able to foster this true alignment of authenticity with that results driven approach. And so when you can get essentially everybody on the same playing field and communicating in the same arena, that transparency is going to mitigate the breakdown of communication, which is such a cornerstone and catalyst for so many of the problems that teams can face. And then lastly, number three, it is encouraging growth and development. So this is where we are stepping into our role as authentic leaders. We're able to prioritize growth for ourselves, which again is anchored in leading by example, and the development of our team members. So whether that team is on the home front, whether that team is at work, in your business, however you see teams, that ability for you to prioritize the growth and the development of your team is going to be huge, because in that, we're able to recognize that fostering this supportive and truly empowering environment, it's going to lead to better results. So those three things that we can do today as leaders, like practical, meaty steps that you can take forward. Number one, lead by example. And that comes by knowing who you are and recentering and refocusing on that every single day. Number two, focusing on transparency with yourself and with your team. And then number three, encouraging that growth and development. And those three things are very practical ways that we can start with implementing unmasked principles.
Those are amazing. I love those. I wrote notes down so that I can
Yes.
implement them into my day as well. So, this topic is not specific to men or women
Mhm.
necessarily. Like, all leaders should be thinking this way, but there, like anything, I think there's different approaches that men and women have to
Yeah.
take to the same type of concept. And so, I'm wondering, how does this look different? And why does a woman maybe need to take a different approach to this if that's the belief
Yeah.
than the way that a man can lead? And that question is coming from a place of like, I'm all in on this. And I saw a total change in the way that my teams responded to me and the way that I felt in leadership roles and the results that I was driving when I started to be authentic and transparent and a
Yes.
whole person and
Good.
see my team as whole people and all of those things. But I think where I still got in my head and tripped up and insecure again was when I realized that most of the men around me that were my counterparts or were more senior than I weren't taking that same approach. And so
Mhm.
not that that prevented me from keep it like, I I'm gonna just keep on keeping on, but it's not always as I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know that there's that many men that are thinking this way.
No, because
And
it's not natural for us
yeah,
or women. But I'm curious, Kara, when you started to show up with more authenticity, what was the effect or the response from your team? Because I'm sure you weren't like, hey guys, I'm trying to be more authentic today. Like it was more just like your inner awareness and then those actions. So what did you see as a result from that?
I just saw them trusting me more. And
Mm,
with the trust came more sharing with me like what they needed help with,
yeah,
what they weren't feeling good about, what they felt great about, and I could just leave them alone. It was like a trust thing initially. And I think with trust turns into a lot more productive and effective and results driven relationships that you can have with.
totally.
So it was a level of trust that I did not have before
Mhm.
because it's not actually that shocking because nobody knew who I actually was. And why would you trust somebody that you don't feel like you actually know?
Exactly. Yeah. That's so good. That's such great insight. To loop back around to your question, I think if we look at the similarities first, and then we can look at the differences because there's similarities in both. And I think that many of you hear this too. So authenticity, number one, it's universal. So regardless of if you're male or if you're female, authenticity in both of these roles, it's essential for effective leadership, period.
Yep.
Authenticity is essential for effective leadership. And both men and women are going to benefit from being genuine, being
Mhm.
transparent, and being vulnerable in their leadership roles. Vulnerability does not make you weak. Vulnerability makes you an incredible leader. Brene Brown, that's like her sweet spot is vulnerability, shame, all of that. And I mean, she has so much research on the power of that. And I think if we are able to draw into more empowerment on being vulnerable, not in a sense of like you're airing your dirty laundry and your problems, but you're connected to who you are and you're
Mhm.
real and you're raw. That is power in vulnerability. So authenticity, universal for men and women. The second is looking at we're guys and girls, like we're both going to face similar pressures to conform to leadership expectations. We're all human. And so when we are masking from our true selves, typically we're masking from vulnerability,
Mhm.
rejection, fear, the need to maintain control. And so I think if we're able to break down this barrier of men are tougher than women in this, it's like it's not about being tough. It's about we need authentic leaders.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we're all humans trying to do our best. And so that connects us as humans. And also, there are some pretty significant differences for those of us in leadership who are women. And that first is the gender expectations in us. So many women, we face these unique societal, I would say, expectations and stereotypes when it comes to leadership. And often we can navigate this as almost like a double bind where we are expected to be assertive, but not too aggressive because we can be snarky or a B word or whatever it is, right? So we need to be assertive, but we don't want to be this super aggressive woman. Or we can be confident, but not arrogant, right? Or these other stereotypical things where we're supposed to just show up. And it's like, how can we lead, but not be perceived as a certain character or express authenticity in leadership when we want to be assertive and we want to be clear and we want to be confident. We don't want to be labeled as whatever. And I feel like men can get away with being assertive and clear and this and that in these roles. And as women begin to rise to this, it can label us as being a certain way. So that's a difference, the gender expectation of how men and women are supposed to act, quote
Yeah.
unquote, act in leadership roles And then the other is looking at biases. So women in leadership positions, we typically can be subject to bias, which can lead to scrutiny, which can lead to challenges when we display authenticity. So when we are able to navigate biases and understand them carefully, we're able to balance authenticity with perceptions and competence and likability. And so it's knowing, hey, what are the similarities that we face as men and women in leadership? What are some of the challenges that women face uniquely? And how can we understand them, right? Because when we're aware of them, we can do our inner work to change them. And that has that true ripple effect and how we are showing up and carrying ourselves, and also allows us to have more empathy and connection for other people. Because when we can understand other perspectives and perceptions, it helps us relate human to other people, regardless if we're relating to men or women.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you're following the 3 ways that you shared with everyone on how to start implementing a
Mhm.
unmasked leadership style while still being results driven, it's hard to be
Mhm.
misconstrued. Like if you're being authentic and vulnerable, like it's hard to be misconstrued. If you're leading
Yes.
towards growth, it's hard to be misconstrued. So I think that if you're sticking to the principles of what you said, you can navigate through some of the different like gender expectations and leadership in general. But say that somebody is all in on like bought into the idea that unmasked leadership is actually the most effective way to not only feel like yourself and feel aligned and connected to what you're doing, but also be an effective leader. And they want to follow the 3 ways that you
Mhm.
laid out. What are ways that they can hold themselves accountable to this? Like, how do
Mhm.
you not forget? How do you not get, because I think that a lot of this in implementing this type of leadership style is like unwinding things that are very
Totally.
ingrained in you out of protection, out of not wanting people to see you as weak or vulnerable or whatever it is. And I would imagine, like, I mean, my desk is full of sticky note reminders when I'm trying to
Yeah.
work on something. So,
Yeah.
what is your suggestion of how to hold yourself accountable to
Yeah.
sticking with something like this, and maybe triggers and reminders for people to
Yes.
check
I
themselves?
totally. I love this. I think that being able to understand that this is a practice, this is a journey. It's not just hear a podcast and move forward. It is a daily commitment to being able to commit to this over and over and over again. And so the first is understanding like umbrella term, this is a daily discipline. And so having some kind of habit where you are journaling and you have this time for self-reflection. And so whether this is dedicated time like in your journal every morning where you're able to journal about thoughts, emotions, experiences, all these things where you're unwinding basically your brain and you're able to pay attention to reoccurring patterns or triggers or areas of growth or improvement. We're just able to work through all the inner gunk. That's huge. And so taking time every single day to anchor in, to journal, to self-reflect, even if it's 5 minutes, just having that connection with yourself every single day is absolutely huge. The second way is that we can really begin to incorporate more mindfulness and more compassion practices. Compassion practices are huge because as high achievers, we can be drill sergeants to ourselves. We have high expectations for ourselves. And oftentimes, without doing this work, we're never good enough for ourselves. We're always falling short of our own expectations. And we don't take that time to celebrate, to track how far we've come because we're always on to the next.
Mhm.
And so we develop this numbness to life, this numbness to ourselves. And we're looking for that quick hit of achievement, of a mark of whatever it is we're going for, we miss out on all this other stuff. So when we're able to engage in meditation, relaxation techniques to really cultivate this present moment awareness and observe our thoughts and our feelings without the judgment, we can connect to the sensations in our body and our mind and the quality of our breath and the fluctuations of our mental state. This is not a pass for getting out of the ups and downs of our mental state throughout the day, but it's the awareness of it and developing those self compassion strategies to know when we had those self critical thoughts or when we have this self comparison or whatever it is that we're able to monitor it and really infuse throughout our mornings and throughout our days more self awareness, self compassion, and mindfulness. In that, we're going to develop a more positive and resilient mindset and emotional resiliency that really affects your attitude towards yourself over time. And so those two things are absolutely huge in being able to move forward and just simple ways to be able to apply that to our days over and over and over again. And I think if you wanted to add one more, it would be the power of authentic relationships and taking time to build authentic relationships with others, but also the most important relationship is an authentic relationship with yourself. And oftentimes we don't have that because we are running so hard and so fast from ourselves. So taking time to develop that authentic relationship with you first, and then investing in authentic relationships with your teams, your
Mhm.
families, your circle. I mean, we are missing that connection because our world is so busy, our world is so fast. And so when we're able to slow that down and offer connection and offer authenticity and bring that pace and that peace, it will radically transform how we show up in the world.
This is all so helpful and so
Mm,
good. The practical tips, I think, are what I resonate with the most. It's like,
yeah.
okay, conceptually, I understand, but how do I do it? And how do I hold myself
Yeah.
accountable? So thank you. I feel like
Yeah.
this is a great stopping point for part one.
I feel like we tip of the iceberg. We just got started of
I know.
these conversations that need to be had around leadership. I mean, it's not, we don't talk about it at all. And it's a really silent suffer. So the fact that you have held space for this conversation, thank you, Kara, because I think that the more we can have these conversations and break down these walls, the masks will begin to come down, come off.
I agree. I totally agree. It's a movement. It's
It's
not
a
like a
movement.
not a one thing. It's a movement
It's
for sure.
totally a movement. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you for having me.
Are you somebody that loves to listen to podcasts, learn, and consume knowledge in general, but maybe you find the process of picking those episodes that are really value packed and worth your time challenging? Am I right? You're busy. I get it. If that's the case, the Pod Squad is for you. Every Tuesday, Haley and I are dropping in your inbox the absolute best listens for personal development and business podcasts for the week. We will even give you the Cliff Notes version so that you can still apply the takeaways and consume the knowledge quickly, even if you don't have time to listen to them all. To get the rec sent to you, just go to getgateless.com/subscribe or click the link in the show notes and enter your email address, and that's all you have to do. You will look forward to this every single week, and it will just be your listening cue until the following Tuesday. I hope you enjoy.